been a hot minute, but guess what it's time for? Rowan and Rick. I missed you, Rowan. Anyways, are you ready? What the fuck is this on my face? Shoes. What's going on? Why is it like that? Anyway. Right. Chapter 5, The Mountain. They had been walking beside the dry bed of the stream for hours and had left the village far behind. Looking back, Rowan could no longer even see the tall stone walls of the mill, the highest building, because the trees had screened it from view. In front of them, like a massive wall, rose the mountain. In another 2 hours, the others said they would reach it. The map showed clearly that they must begin their climb at the place where the water gushed from its underground tunnel to form the stream. There they would rest for a while and consult the map before going on. Rowan was very tired. The bag he carried was dragging at his shoulders, and his back and legs ached, but he knew he had to keep walking and not complain. The others were trying to make it easy for him to keep up, but he could tell that the slow pace was irritating Brondon and Val, at least. It was hard to tell how Ellis felt, because he rarely spoke at any time, even when they had passed the mill and the great wooden wheel lying motionless in the mill race, its own channel on one side of the dry stream bed. He had said nothing, only looked, then turned his head back towards the mountain. Rowan watched him now, striding at the head of the group. He carried his pack and the extra weight of a heavy rope, a small axe, and their supply of torches with ease. Close behind him walked his sister. They were a strange, silent pair. Rowan had heard Jilla say to Strong John that it was as though they lived in a world of their own, a world inhabited by only 2 people. They seemed as hard and immovable as the stone walls of their own mill. They were about the same age as Jilla, and Rowan had taken them for granted as he grew up. They were just part of the normal day-to-day life of the village for him, like the other adults he had known since babyhood. But lately he had come to realize that Val and Ellis really were unusual, and that his mother and people like Strong John and Alun thought so too. Behind Val, a head shorter but stocky and determined, tramped Brondon. Marley came next, smiling occasionally at Alun, who was swinging along beside her, whistling and singing as if he was on a country jaunt. They had put Rowan second last, with Strong John bringing up the rear. Every now and then, John would speak to him. "All well, Rowan," he would call heartily, or "Nearly there now, my friend." Rowan would nod and mutter an unwilling answer. He knew John didn't really care how he felt. He just felt responsible for him. John was good-natured and agreeable to everyone. It was his way, and he had always been pleasant to Rowan. But that was different from liking. He cared for Renard, you could see that. But with Rowan, he never really relaxed. He tried too hard to be nice. You don't have to try when you really like someone. Rowan knew that. And sometimes John called him Skinny Rabbit and laughed at him for being afraid of things. John was talking to him now because of Jilla. Rowan had heard his mother whisper, "Take care of him," as she said goodbye to the big man before they left. And John had taken both her hands in his and said, "I will, Jilla. By my life, I promise I will bring him home to you." Remembering this, Rowan felt a flash of resentment. What right had Strong John to look at his mother like that? What right had he told her had he to hold her hands as if he were more to her than her dead husband's friend. It had been a shock to him there in the market square when he realized that John might feel more for his mother than simple friendship. It had been horrible to think that he might even plan on becoming her husband one day. No one could ever take his father's place, thought Rowan bitterly. No one. He stamped along, staring straight ahead, and John should feel responsible for this mess, he thought. It was John's teasing that had angered Sheba, so that she had made Rowan the keeper of the map. It was John's fault that Rowan had been forced to become the weak, unwanted seventh member of this party. At that, Rowan's thoughts changed direction, and his anger cooled. He wondered whether John and Marley had remembered Sheba's words. 7 hearts the journey make, 7 ways the hearts will break. They said nothing, but surely they must have thought about it, as he had. A shiver ran down his spine. There was no way that Sheba could have known the number of travellers in advance, unless she really had had a vision of the future, as she lay back in her chair, her eyes half closed. And if that part of the prophecy had come true, what of all the rest? Rowan bent his head to watch the ground under his feet. He did not want to look at the mountain. As the last hour's tramping drew to a close and the rocks of the mountain's foothills loomed large and sharp, the sun was already warm on Rowan's back. For some time now he had managed to stay on his feet only by thinking of the bookshelf. While Jilla had been loading his pack for the journey, he had slipped away to the fields to say goodbye. He had found the beast swaying anxiously in the green grass that still surrounded the muddy drinking pool. "We are going to help you," Rowan had told them as he moved from one to the other, stroking and patting, drawing in the familiar, warm animal smell of them. "Soon there will be sweet water again. It won't be long." Last of all, he had come to Star. He put his arms as far as they would reach around her neck and laid his head on her shaggy wool. "Goodbye, Star," he had said. "Wait for me. I will bring back the water. I will not fail you." He knew Star could not understand his words, but she had grunted and snuffled to him, as if comforted just by the tone of his voice. "Anard and Mother will see to you while I am gone," he had told her. "If Dawn has her calf while I am away, they will help her. They promised me." One final hug and he had to go, but Star's trust and strength stayed with him, even when his knees trembled with tiredness and his breath shuddered in his chest. "Yo, Ellis!" Strong John's shout broke into Rowan's daydream. Alun and Marley came to a stop in front of him. He stumbled to a halt and looked up. Before him rose a cliff of a rock. Beside him, the dry stream bed had become a deep round hole, still puddled with a little muddy water. There was a black opening in the cliff just above the hole. Dying weed and moss crusted its smooth edges, so this was where the water came from. "The water usually gushes from there," Strong John was saying to Val and Ellis, pointing to the opening. "When it is running, as it should, you cannot stand here without being soaked by sprays." That was very rude. Rondon clambered down into the empty pool and walked busily around in it, kicking at the soft mud. Then she bent over the rock to look up into the opening in the cliff face, as though hoping to find an answer there. "Sheba said the problem was at the top of the mountain," said Marley, who did not seem to be able to stop herself from being irritated by Rondon. "There is nothing to see down here." "There is no harm, I suppose, in looking for myself, Marley the Weaver," Rondon retorted. She rubbed her hand against the rock, feeling up into the hole in the cliff as far as her arms would reach. "A round tunnel. The bottom walls and top are polished smooth," she reported, and wiped her slimy hands against her clothes before climbing back onto the bank. "All the sharp edges have been worn away by the running water, no doubt." "As one would expect," snapped Marley. Rowan sank down on the grass. His knees would not hold him any longer. He pulled off his heavy bag and fumbled in it for his drink bottle. "Drink a little, but not too much," Alun warned, kneeling down beside him. "We do not know how long our supplies may have to last. We may not find water on the mountain." Rowan swallowed a mouthful of warm, metal-tasting water. It was delicious. He could have drained the flask easily, but he forced himself to replace the cap, and as he did so, tears sprang into his eyes. He was so tired, and the real journey had not even begun. The other members of the party threw down their bags and stretched. Then, one by one, they too flung themselves down on the grass. "The map, Rowan," urged Alun. "Let us see it now, but hold on to it all the time, mind you. The coming and going of the figures upsets my stomach." Rowan took the map from its pack and unrolled it on the grass, weighting the corners down with stones. The others gathered around. "We are here, you see," said Strong John, his finger hovering over the surface. "And according to the red markings, we must start climbing at just this point. The track goes up past the cave from which the stream flows and continues until the mountain levels, and the trees begin, up here." He pointed to a green, waving mass of leaves high above them. "A steep climb," grunted Val. "The boy will have trouble." "Then we will have to help him," said Strong John cheerfully. Alun was puzzling over the map. "What are these white patches?" he asked, waving a finger over several places on the parchment. Marley frowned. "They are all beside the path, 6 of them in all. Could it be that Sheba has erased some things of importance to trick us?" "I would put nothing past her," said Strong John. "But after all, it is the path that is most important, and that at least is clear." "Quite right," put in Brondon, stretching and yawning. "It is pointless to be concerned with anything other than the task at hand." But Rowan stared at the white patches on the map with a growing sense of anxiety. Why had he not noticed them before? Now that he had seen them, they jumped out at him. Blank spaces, almost evenly spaced along the path, the last at the very top. Blank spaces on a surface otherwise completely covered with color and line. What did they mean? The first space was at the point where the path entered the trees. They would find out what it meant soon enough. "We go through the forest at first, it seems," Ronan was continuing. "A flat walk due east. That should be easy enough, though of course with the boy it will take us longer." She sighed heavily and returned to the map. "The directions are clear. Where the forest trees end, we turn northwest and move across the slower ground. A short distance, it should not take long to cover. And so on, up to the top. Simple. I have a compass, fortunately, and so I know Marley and John, for we traded them together on our last trip to the coast." She turned to Val and Ellis. "You really should take your turn on the market trips, my friends. So many interesting things to see and useful things to trade for." Val shrugged. "The mill must keep working, Brondon. We cannot close it down to gallivant wherever we pleased." "But one of you could go, and one could stay," suggested Alun lazily, chewing a blade of grass and blinking up at the sky. Val went very still. "That would not suit us," said Ellis flatly. "It is not our way." "You never go to the coast either, Alun," Marley pointed out. "You always say you are too busy. You are as bad as Val and Ellis." Brondon opened her mouth to say something, then thought better of it. "In any case," she remarked instead, after a moment, "the compasses are a marvel. The Maris folk use them when sailing the open sea. How much easier than that will our task be, for we have landmarks to also follow. We will be home by tomorrow midday, mark my words." "If it was so simple, we would not have needed to bring the map with us, Brondon." Marley leaned forward. "The mountain is a dangerous place, a place to fear. You should take nothing for granted." "I take nothing for granted, Marley the Weaver. As you know, except the evidence of my own eyes, snapped Rondon. And if you fear, you should not be of this party. It is bad enough that we must drag the boy along, quavering in his boots. Do not forget, Rondon, that you were the one who insisted upon that, barked Strong John. Rondon shrugged and turned away. It would be better, said Alun mildly, if we put aside our differences. Then he sat up and widened his eyes. He held out his hands, making them tremble violently. And if fear is the issue, I, for one, am terrified, he squeaked. He threw himself back onto the grass, wagging his head and chattering his teeth. Strong John and Marley laughed, and even Rowan managed to smile. But Val and Alice stared silently first at Alun and then at each other. Rondon snorted. Well, if Alun can be revived from his terror, I think we should begin, Marley said, pulling a thick rope from her pack. We will climb with ropes, will we not? I may not feel the fear of which I am accused, but I do not fancy a fall on these rocks all the same. When food was scarce in Rowan had to climb trees, bending the leafy branches down to meet the snuffling, eager mouths of the hungry bookshaw. But he clung dizzy and pale to even the lowest boughs. He had no head for heights. The climb that followed was to him like the worst of nightmares. A rope attached him to Marley, Alun and the other climbers above, and to Strong John below. When he slipped, as he did over and over again, his light body, weighed down by his pack, swung sickeningly into space as far as the rope allowed. The sky spun above him, the ground spun below. His own terrified screams echoed in his ears. His ribs were crushed by the rope that saved him, and then his body swung back against the rocks with a bruising thud, and he had to climb again. This was bad enough, but worse was the fear that one of the others would prove as careless as he. If John slipped, the weight might pull them all to their deaths on the rocks far below. If one of the others slipped, even John might not be able to hold them. Sore, trembling, and aching in every muscle, Rowan struggled on, and when at last they dragged him over the top of the cliff, and he fell to the ground sweating and panting, the world swam red before his eyes for a moment before he fainted. Interesting. They're finally getting somewhere. Also, guys, this video is sponsored. Use the code pleasing123 at checkout.